Never admit that to your teacher. All right. So we are on chapter 5, Mishnah 1. What's that? Oh, yes, sorry. There you go. Did you want a copy as well, or are you okay with that version? Okay. So this is the last chapter of Sukkah. So we're in the home stretch. And this mostly is about Simchat Beit HaShoeva, which is what was known in English. We usually call it the celebration of the water drawing, of the taking out of the water, right? Like from a well, not like drawing with a pen, but drawing up water. This is a ritual we don't have anymore. It was a ritual only in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, at the time of the temple. And we're going to see a little bit about how it worked. And it has some other interesting tangents to discuss. So
it's connected with the Shmini Atzeret the next day. No Shmini Atzeret the next day.
Well, it is somewhat connected to the Shmini Atzeret. I mean, it's connected to the idea of Geshem, of water, right? This is the whole idea of, getting ready to prepare for the blessings of Geshem, for water, that comes right as Sukkot finishes. So water was kind of important in Israel. It's important now. I mean, what was it, a 5-year drought?
It's kind of Shmini Atzeret, but in a different way.
Yeah, but it was a celebration that actually happened that used water, that was actually used as part of the ceremony. It wasn't just a tefillat Geshem. It wasn't just a prayer for Geshem. It was an actual usage of the water in the temple precincts. And apparently it was a really, really good time, which is what we're gonna get into, right? I mean, all of Sukkot was considered a party because you had all your food, right? Remember, they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have canned goods and stuff like that. They could preserve some food. They could dry some food. But you always ended up with extra at harvest that you couldn't save. And what were you going to do with it? You're going to eat it. And you're going to eat it while it's fresh, and you're going to eat it while it's sweet, and you're going to eat it while it's good. And that is why this was one of the prime party times of the year. It's one of the reasons why still in America we do Thanksgiving after the fall harvest, because that was when you had an abundance of food. And then during all of winter, your food would be going down, 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 down. So you party today because you don't know what's going to happen by springtime. So with that in mind, we're on chapter 5, Mishnah 1. And gentlemen, I need to have a reader.
What does that mean, one?
Back and forth, okay.
I don't need me. You? Please. I give honor to the singers.
Each comes first.
Yes.
The flute was for 5 or 6 days. This refers to the flute at the Beit HaShoeva, the place of the water drawing, which does not override Shabbat or the festival day.
All right, so they would play a special flute during this ceremony, but the flute was not like a mitzvah, so therefore if it was the Chag or if it was Shabbat, they didn't play the flute. Right. Part 2?
Part 2. They said, he who has not seen the Simchat Beit HaShoeva has never seen rejoicing in his life.
Right, so this is kind of like, in the modern world, if someone were to say, if you've never been to Mardi Gras, you don't know what a party is, right? Or if you've never been to Carnival, you don't know what a party is. Now, you may think that the party you had at university was a big party. That's nothing. Well, this was our party, right? The Simchat Beit HaShoeva, this was the party of the Jewish year. Forget Purim, right? Forget Hanukkah. This was the party. And that's going to actually come back in our next Mishnah, of leading to some other tangents that the Talmud goes into. But I know I don't always bring the things from the Talmud, but this is a particularly interesting and relevant piece. So if we move on to Mishnah 2.
At the conclusion of the first festival day of Sukkot, they descended to the women's court, where they made a great improvement. Okay, so the end of the first day, now we can actually start doing the ceremony because it's no longer Chag. Remember, Eretz Israel, only one day for the Chag. And they go to Ezrat Nashim. Now, I'm trying to remember whether we've covered this before or not, but it really bears repeating, not just for you gentlemen, but for anyone else that might be watching, that the women's court is a bit of an odd name. It's not a name that we would use in modern English, because when you had the temple, do my best sketch, right? You had the temple area proper, and this is where the temple was, and you had the altar over here, and there was
the main gates into the temple area. And in here, this is the area of the Kohanim, right? That was it. And there were in front of it steps that went up. And this is where you would come up to if you had a sacrifice. So, you know, you'd bring your goat and you'd come right up to the gates, and the Kohen would meet you there. You put your hands on the goat, you do whatever you needed to do, if it was a celebration, if it was a chatat, whatever it was, and then they take it in and they do the sacrifice for you right there. Very good. But all around the temple, there was a huge open plaza. And this is exactly the women's court. This whole area.
Why? Why did they say
okay. So why is it called Ezrat Nashim? Because how do you think the men got here? they walked, you know, from whatever entrance they came to there. But the only difference was this was for men only. The raised platform. Everything else was for women and men. Right?
Oh, so men can be there.
Absolutely.
Oh.
How else do you get? You can't like drop from a helicopter, right? Come down on the rope. No, this whole area was for both.
So the name is really misleading.
Well, but no, it makes actually sense because this was as far as women could go, right? This was the limit for women.
Steps.
They couldn't go up the steps, but they could go everywhere else. So they called it the women's court to remind us that that was the limit for the women. Now, as you can see, we're talking, you know, like 20, 30 feet as the main difference. And that was the only part that women weren't allowed to enter. The rest of it was women and men. Yeah. And that women and men, they were mixed, right? There was no separation between the men and women.
But the Mechitza in the Orthodox.
Well, this is where the Mechitza happens. I mean, Simchat Beit HaShoeva. This day, this celebration, is the only time we hear about a separation between men and women in the entire Talmud or the entire rabbinic literature. No, only for Simchat Beit HaShoeva. When they're coming for Yom Kippur, there's no mention. When they come for Pesach, there's no mention. When they come for Shavuot, there's no mention. When you come for just a regular offering, there's no mention, right?
So inside where they supposed to no, so the
inside where?
No, the place where they did the sacrifices.
Right here.
They were only the Kohanim. Right. The people couldn't go there and see the sacrifice.
No, they could see because the big gates were open.
But only the men could see.
The women could still see-ish, right? I mean, it wasn't like, you know, 30 feet up, but they could still see in. But they weren't allowed to come any closer than that, right? So what happens? And like I said, this is the tangent that the Talmud goes into. Is they're saying, what is this enactment? What is this activity that happens at Simchat Beit HaShoeva? They said, well, there was a problem. This was such a party like Mardi Gras, like Carnival, right? That people got a little frisky, got a little carried away. That it led to transgression. You have this many people, men and women squeezed together, and it is very happy, and everyone is feeling super good and super glad because they've got a full belly, maybe they've had a little bit of wine, and things happened. And the rabbis were very worried about this, is that, you know, you've got this amazing ceremony going on, not just Sukkot, but specifically Simchat Beit HaShoeva, and people are getting a little out of hand, men and women together. And so they said, we got to stop this. So the Talmud goes through a whole different set of put the women in front, put the men in front, put them side by side, and it wasn't solving the problem. And so what they eventually did is they built a women's section and a men's section.
Inside or outside?
In the Ezrat Nashim, in the women's court, they built like grandstands. And they had a lower level that the men were in, and they had an upper level that the women were in. So that both could look in to watch the ceremony.
Like this, the modern synagogues today.
Yeah, the Orthodox.
Like with a balcony.
Yeah.
Right. Not with women behind a curtain in the back.
No.
In fact, the Talmud specifically says that doesn't work. Right? Having the women in the back doesn't work. But the only thing that worked was having a balcony section.
Separation.
But it was only used and only needed for this ceremony, right? For Simchat Beit HaShoeva. For the rest of the holidays, for a regular day, in the temple itself, they didn't care about men and women being next to each other. Only when there was already this party atmosphere that was the most party atmosphere of ever did they worry that men and women were getting a little too friendly and they needed to separate. And even then, they wanted to make sure they separated in a way that, yes, I guess women had to go up a little bit more stairs, but they both had access to what was happening, and they both were able to enjoy the ceremony without the hanky-panky. But it wasn't that they didn't say women have to stay home. They didn't like close off the Temple Mount and only allow men in. They found a compromise for this one wild and raucous day to allow them both to be there without any transgression. And there was no mention that this became standard for any other event or any other service.
How it became that
that's a whole nother class.
It's the influence of the Christian and Muslims in the Middle Age.
There is some very good evidence, right? Because when you look through Rambam, when you look through the Rif and all the great, and the Tur and Shulchan Aruch, none of them mention any halacha for a mechitza, right? Yes, there's halacha of like davening in front of a woman that you're staring at, right? And that's not a good idea to be like, looking at her and going, while you're trying to do the Amidah, and there's definitely discussions about concentration for Kriyat HaShema and being distracted, but it's not only women you have to worry about being distracted by. There's lots of distractions we have to avoid for Kriyat HaShema. That's why we close our eyes. It's one of the best ways to get rid of distractions. But there's no mention of a mechitza per se in any of those texts. The usual apologetics for that is, well, everybody knew that you needed a mechitza, so they didn't have to talk about it. It's like everybody also knew you didn't have to murder.
The first time that the first text that happened that have the mechitza?
If I remember, the first time it shows up is sometime in like the 1700s that you begin to see it written out in law books.
Very late. As
being written out, yes. Now, did they exist before that? We can but we can look at old synagogues in Europe and we can see balconies. But when you look at old synagogues in Eretz Israel, like in Tiberias or in the Golan or any place in the Galil, you don't find a mechitza. And you don't find any evidence of a balcony either. So either women didn't go to synagogue ever, which we don't see any evidence that they were prohibited from coming, or they came and they were at least in the same room. Maybe they didn't sit next to, maybe they sat, on another side. But since the synagogue there always were in a circle, a square, they would have had to have been visible to each other. So yes, the modern mechitza is a modern thing.
Interesting. Why during the 17th century?
Well, that's when it begins to get written down. And why does it begin to get written down there? Because people are beginning to object, right? So you have the Enlightenment starting, and you have people who are the early stages of the people who are objecting to some of the ideas of the late Middle Ages. And so you got to write it down so they can't change it. And that sort of is the beginning of what will eventually become Haredi Judaism, of taking what was custom and turning it into halacha and then making that stricter than it ever used to be. That whole process begins as the Enlightenment begins. It's a counter revolution to the Enlightenment. It's very much a reactionary political movement. But prior to that, yes, like you said, during the Middle Ages, the attitude towards women among Christians and among Muslims rubbed off on many of the Jewish communities. And that probably led to the mechitza becoming a more common feature if they invited women to shul at all. But that was a custom. It was not halacha. So yes, thank you for indulging the tangent, but that's a very important modern topic, and one that, when we talk about, for example, equal access at the Kotel, I think is very important, since in Ezrat Nashim, men and women were able to stand right next to each other, and no one had a problem with that. I'm not entirely sure why on the Temple Mount you could be next to each other, but why at the bottom of the retaining wall you can't be.
Well, the answer also could be Minhag HaMakom. That sometimes is much
Tradition.
stronger than the tradition.
So which was the first Minhag HaMakom?
Which is the current one.
So it's the old joke of whoever is currently making the rules, their rules are traditional, but they're only making the rules now because they kicked out the last person and changed the rules that they had been doing, right? So every revolutionary eventually becomes the new tyrant, and that is what we see in many religious groups, right? So you take like Haredism, that is a revolutionary version of Judaism that began in the 1800s. And now it is sitting in the middle and says, no one can change. But they changed Judaism to get where they are. And the Reform movement changed to get where they are. My mother in the Reform congregation she worked for, she used to have a great story. She said, sometime in the late 70s, they began to use a guitar on Friday night. And people liked it. The guitar was very nice. And one of the congregants, like 3, 4, 5 years later, said, well, I also play the flute. I could play the flute with the guitar. And they said, what, are you kidding? The tradition is to only play the guitar. And it's like, but it had already become the tradition, even in a Reform congregation, which is in philosophy is supposed to not be set on tradition. Once the people are used to it, they're used to it. And now if you want to change it, everybody forgets that you changed it to get there in the first place. And so, yes, Minhag HaMakom is a nice phrase. When you are entering a makom that isn't your makom, and when you are entering a makom that has a tradition that is native to itself, but when someone else got a position of authority for other reasons than they were born there, then to call it Minhag HaMakom is disingenuous. If you go to England and they have Minhag HaMakom of what is English halakha, and you go to Spain and they have Minhag HaMakom of what is the halakha, and you go to Yemen, they have Minhag HaMakom of the halakha. Yes, if I walk into Yemen or a Yemenite shul, I can't change their minhag. I mean, that is what their ancestors gave them. It's what they've learned. But that is a native and natural Minhag HaMakom, not a political Minhag HaMakom. And of course, usually the best way to know what the Minhag HaMakom is to look around and see what people are doing. And if you let people do what they will do, then you reveal the true minhag.
Not necessarily about Orlando, but because you are
recording after class.
Reminder me, okay?
Okay. All right. So let's move on. The rest of it is going to be a lot of ceremony and with a lot of details that
we didn't finish the.
No. I know. That's what I mean. I mean, from here on out, we're going to be looking at a lot of details of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. So don't be surprised if it doesn't look familiar, because this is something we don't do anymore. So I think it was still your turn. Or no, it was your turn. Yes, sir.
They were golden candelabra. They are with 4 golden bulbs atop them, 4 ladders for each candelabrum, and 4 youth from among the young priests holding pitchers of oil containing 120 loaves, which they poured into each bowl.
All right. So basically, it's like the torch lighting ceremony of the Olympics. You have these giant torches out there, and they're being filled total with like 15 liters of oil, which is a lot of oil. And you got the young Kohanim that are going up the ladders to light this. It's a big dramatic occasion.
Yeah, it sounds like
the Olympics. Yeah, it's there's something about fire. Fire's cool. All right, Mishnah 3. Yes.
Okay. From the worn-out hands and belts of the priest, they made wicks, and with them they kindled the lamp.
I always love this detail, right? You've got the pants and tunics of the Kohanim, and eventually they start to wear out. Clothes wear out. What are you going to do with them? Just throw them away, right? Turn them into rags to clean up messes, right? No, you're going to use one thing that was for a mitzvah for another mitzvah. And so they would take the threads from the pants, and they would shred the fabric, and they would turn them into wicks to use in the lamps.
Makes sense.
it's a beautiful, beautiful message.
No, it's economy.
Well, it's economy. Trust me, the Kohanim could afford wicks. But this is also the idea that something that's been used for a mitzvah can only really be used for another mitzvah. Right? And this
it's respect also for the cloth.
Exactly.
Because the cloth was used so much for
holy things. Yeah. Exactly. And this is something that we still mimic. So for example, the Torah covers, right? If we decide to change the Torah covers, we can't just throw away the old Torah covers, right? The best we could do if we can't find another mitzvah to use them for would be to put them in the geniza and to bury them, right? We can't just turn them into rags and use them for something that is whole, that is just, not sacred, mundane. Thank you. You speak English better than me sometimes. That we can't just use them for mundane purposes. And that's what we're seeing here as well. Part two?
Part two. And there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem that was not illuminated by the light of the Beit HaShoeva.
So you can imagine, the light from these huge menorot was just shining over the entire city. The city wasn't quite as big as it is now, but even still, this was an incredible sight. The entire city would have been washed in this light. All right, Mishnah 4. You got the long one.
The good men and men of good deeds would dance before them with flaming torches that were in their hands, and would utter before them words of songs and praises.
All right, so here is your Mardi Gras, right? You got the guys out there dancing with flaming torches, and they are singing and dancing. Now, what's the difference between this and Mardi Gras? You're not picking the best dancers, or the best singers, or the most handsome guys. You're picking the most righteous people.
And also they don't throw also a torch to the people.
Well, no. You don't want accidents to happen. But the idea is, we don't want them becoming carried away and doing something inappropriate. They have to take seriously what they're doing. This isn't just a party. This isn't just a game. But B, the people that we give this honor to have to be people that everybody will respect as being good people.
Who picked them?
Well, I mean, it was picked, by the Kohanim, by the community. Onward.
And the Leviim with harps, lyres, cymbals, trumpets, and countless musical instruments stood on the 15 steps that descend from the court of the Israelim to the woman's court.
Right, that's our blue arc here.
Corresponding to the 15 songs of ascending psalms.
Shir HaMa'alot, right? The 15 psalms that go up. And
upon them, the Leviim could stand with musical instrument and chant songs.
All right, so you have to imagine all of these steps just filled with the Leviim, with their harps and their instruments and the music, just singing these psalms.
It's kind of Simchat Torah.
What we have is Simchat Torah. They didn't have Simchat Torah, right? Simchat Torah was invented much later as a formal ceremony. Of course, we always were reading the Torah, but doing it as a particular style is something that only began 1,000 years ago. And then the way we recognize it is only a few hundred years old for its current final form. So this was indeed a huge party. And, we could even guess that maybe Simchat Torah came to fill the gap that Simchat Beit HaShoeva left when we didn't have that party.
Rabbi, they have a section in the Siddur that it's the song of the day that the Leviim say.
Right.
Is this the same way? They would stand.
Yes, I mean the Leviim would sing the psalm of the day, the Shir Shel Yom every day. But I'm trying to remember whether it's precisely that or not. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think so, but I don't remember the choreography for the Shir Shel Yom as quickly.
At what time they sung the Shir Shel Yom?
In the morning. But there's a debate of exactly when.
But after Shacharit or between Shacharit and Mincha?
Well, yeah, so around Shacharit, right? So the question is, do they sing it at the beginning of Shacharit or do they sing it at the end of Shacharit, which is still a debate today. So you have some communities that will do the Shir Shel Yom during Psukei de Zimra, and some people, or Birkat HaShachar even, and some people will do it after we've finished Shacharit, after Aleinu and everything. So that there's a different minhag.
The Sephardim are doing it before.
Before?
Yeah. And the Ashkenazim are on it.
Whereas we split the difference. On Shabbat, we do it before, but on weekdays, we do it at the end. Number 3, I believe, or part 3.
2 Kohanim stood at the upper gate that descends from the court of the Israeli to the women's court.
Right, that's the big doors here.
With 2 trumpets in their hands. When they called out, they sounded Antikia, and Trua, and Antikia.
Right, so when right, the chicken goes, that was their sign that it is now time to begin. Right, that was your the whistle for the start time.
So it's the beginning of the day.
Exactly. Yeah, and everybody was there. I mean, you have to imagine, most of the parties that we think about in this part of the world, we think about being nighttime parties. This is a daytime dawn party.
So if they sung the Shir HaMa'alot at the beginning of the day, there's a big chance that also the Aliyot Shel Yom, each day will be also the same time at the beginning of the day.
But that's also the time of Shacharit. So
yeah, but before the Midah.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the day.
We can argue about that. That's why there's different arguments of exactly where it was. And whether we need to do it exactly the way they did it because we're not the Levi'im is a continued issue as well. But you can also tie the Shir HaMa'alot to the Amud HaShachar, the rising of the sun, is also happening at that same time. And now we've just done Tekiah, and we continue.
When they reached the 10th step, they sounded Tekiah, Trua, and Tekiah.
Right, so the 10th step would have been about halfway.
When they reached the court, they sounded Tekiah, Trua, and Tekiah.
All right, so that's when they've actually reached ground level.
So why they didn't write when they reached the 10th step, and after that the other part they do the same sound, because they are repeating exactly the same. It's not.
How much Mishnah have we learned together? Do you really expect them to use like shorthand?
Yeah, because it doesn't change the order. I was expecting the change of the order.
Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah. Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah. Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah.
But you want a different one.
Yes.
So in the time, you have to imagine.
Because different emphasis.
Right, so go back 2,000 years ago, and you're not learning this from a book. You're learning this from your Rav, who is reciting it, and you're repeating it. And he recites it, and you repeat it. And you do that 100 times. Having the familiar pattern of Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah. Next piece, Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah. Next piece, Tekiah, Trua, is a very helpful style for memory.
Yeah.
So yeah, for us, we save pages because we've got pages. But if you need to remember it, you want hooks. You want something that you can easily fit into your brain.
Okay, I think we continue. Sounding Tekiah until they reach the gate leading out to the east.
Right, so that's the gate over here on the Temple Mount.
When they reach the gate leading out to the east, they turn to the west and say.
Right, so they.
No, I think it's something that by coincidence I was studying today about changing from east to west. It's like about the changing. Okay, when you doing something positive and negative, seeing and something more closer to God, changing directions and changing a different approach. So there was a connection.
That's okay. It's a good connection.
Okay.
So what did they say?
Our forefathers who were in this place, their backs were toward the sanctuary, and they faced toward the east, and they bowed eastward toward the sun. But as for us, our eyes are toward Adonai. Right.
So they are reminding everybody that we used to be idolaters. Right. We would watch the sun rise, and we would bow down, and we would worship the sun. But we have come right up to the edge of where the sun is, and bam, we turn our back on the sun. So that we are now facing the temple, and we are facing spiritually towards Adonai, right? We are rejecting the idolatry of our ancient ancestors. Yeah, so we do have respect for our ancestors, but not for everything they did.
You would say, they repeat and say, we are for Adonai, and toward Adonai are our eyes.
Right, so they would actually, add the idea that we are connected to God, not just that we worship God, and That is why we do what we do. Mishnah 5.
Good. Finally. Suffer.
It's not quite as low.
Okay, Mishnah 5. They never have less than 21 blessed in the temple, and never more than 48.
Right, so this is like a regular day of the sounding of the shofar. So we've sort of taken a little break as long as we did our shofar discussion, which you found so interesting. We're going to take a little break and talk about shofars for other days of the blowing of the shofar. And when you blow on a regular day, you would have to have at least 21 minimum, but never more than 48.
Why 21 and 148?
Unfortunately, they don't say. Yeah, I know. But they're going to give a little bit of the breakdown of how you get to 21, right? So why is 21 the special number? It's kind of the accumulation of the other times you need to blow. It adds up to 21 minimum. Well, you'll see. We keep reading.
Every day there were 21 blasts in the temple, 3 at the opening of the gates, 9 at the morning Tamid sacrifice, and 9 at the evening Tamid sacrifice.
All right, so 9 plus 9 plus 3, 21. And part 3?
Part 3. At the Musafim,
right,
additional sacrifice,
which would be on Shabbat or Rosh Chodesh or a Chag.
They would add another 9.
Right, so now we're up to 30.
And on the eve of Shabbat, they would add another 6. This is a sign to the people to stop working, and 3 to mark distinction between the holy and the profane.
Right, so they would do 3 as kind of like a warning bell to let everyone know, all right, guys, put down the hammers, put down your knives, whatever you're doing, Shabbat's coming, and then 3 more, which was, now we're done. Right, so the first was a warning, and then Shabbat is here.
Sounds like in Israel they have this.
They have siren systems like that too, yeah.
Yeah.
And then part 5?
Part 5, on the eve of Shabbat, in the intermediate days of the Sukkot festival, there were 3 at the lower gate.
Right, so this is how we get the 48.
Yeah, 3 at the lower gate, 3 at the water drawing, 3 at the altar, 9 at the daily morning sacrifice, 9 at the daily evening sacrifice, 9 at the additional sacrifices. These is a sign to the people to cease from work, and 3 to mark a distinction between the holy and profane.
And of course, they never explain why 9 and why 3.
Unfortunately not. I mean, I'm sure in additional commentaries, but not within the Mishnah itself.
How about in the Gemara, yes?
I'm trying to remember whether they go into that in detail. I know it's discussed somewhere in some of the other commentaries, but it's not off the top of my head. Chapter 5, Mishnah 6. All right, so this is talking about the watches. The watches in the Kohanim. I guess in modern English, the better word would be shifts. Right? The Kohanim, there were too many Kohanim to be at the temple every day, all the time. And so they would take turns, and different groups would have different shifts during the year or during different days, that it was their turn to be the Kohanim that were doing the sacrifices. And so Mishnah 6 is going to be talking about the shift system.
And the Kohanim and Levim, they don't work at all. They only work in the temple. They don't have another...
Well, they can, but they don't have any official jobs. They don't have any official land for their inheritance. So if the Kohanim isn't working at the temple, if he wants to go be a potter, he can be a potter.
Oh, okay.
But he doesn't have any land to work
for. They cannot be a farmer, but they cannot be anything else.
If they have the resources, they can lease land, and then they could be a farmer on the land. But they don't have the inheritance for the land automatically. So they weren't prohibited from working at other jobs. They just didn't have the resources usually to work at other jobs. Okay, Mishnah 6. I believe it's back in the time. Yes.
On the first festival day of Sukkot, there were 13 bullocks, 2 rams, and 1 he-goat. They reminded 14 yearling sheep for 8 watches.
Okay, so you don't have the explanation. The explanation breaks it down nicely. So let me read it out so that everyone gets it. On the first day of Sukkot,
after that, let's say on the first day, 6 of the
no, not that. No. The commentary.
Oh, okay.
Right. So this commentary does the math, which works well for us. Right. So on the first day of Sukkot, there were 30 animals sacrificed. Right. 13 bulls, 2 rams, 1 goat, and 14 lambs. This means that 16 priestly watches could take 1 animal each, leaving 14 animals for the other 8 watches. On the first day of the festival, and then we're going to break it down, you end up with having to adjust that to make sure there is enough to go around for everyone. All right, so this is the complicated math, as you may remember, of how we keep the Kohanim from attacking each other over who gets the best. If you remember our discussion of the Kohanim sometimes getting a little carried away, pushy, a little
overexcited.
Overexcited. Well, or we could even say greedy, if we wanted to.
Now, Sukkot was the day that they keep more animals.
Yes, right? the whole holiday of Sukkot was the most sacrifice-heavy week of the calendar. So let's go through and we'll see how the whole system works.
On the first day, 6 of the watches offer up 2 each, and the rest offer 1 each. On the second day, 5 offer up 2 each, and the rest 1 each. On the third day, 4 offer up 2 each, and the rest 1. And of course, they are rotating.
Exactly.
Just let me check. On the fourth day, 3 offer up 2 each, and the rest 1 each. On the fifth day, 2 offer up 2 each, and the rest 1 each. On the sixth day, 1 offer up 2, and the rest 1 each. On the seventh day, all were equal. On the 8th day, they are reverted to casting lots as on the other festivals.
Right, on the 8th day, Shmini Atzeret, there's not so many sacrifices. It goes back to being just like a regular holiday. And that meant that you had no way to have enough sacrifices that every group could get a chance to do it. So you just go back to doing it randomly, like you would on any other festival. The only way to be fair.
But still, some people will receive more. Because some watches they will receive more anyway. Because some days they started with, I need to do that in a picture.
Yeah, you need a graph. Well, and you have to remember that we're also talking about a graph of bulls versus goats versus lambs.
That bulls have more meat.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
There were 70 bulls total sacrificed.
So that's what they said in 70.
It's why a lot of things are 70. It's also the idea of that, the archetypical number of nations was 70. And the idea was that actually the bulls were considered to be the bulls of atonement on behalf of all the other nations. We had done our atonement at Yom Kippur. On Sukkot, we're doing atonement on behalf of the rest of the world.
How did they get so many animals? That's a lot of animals. 70.
70 is not much.
And who paid for all these animals?
This would have been paid for by the temple funds, which came from all the people.
You know what? That's not interesting about the 70 bulls representing the 70 nations.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Freud was living at the time, he could say
Freud?
That, yes,
okay.
Say that because we want to say that Jewish people will have all the other people from there, and they cut the bulls.
Well, I mean, there is the notion that when the other nations attacked us, they were hurting what had been giving them benefit, right? We were praying on their behalf, that God would treat them well and God would help them.
That was very nice. I was thinking the other direction.
Right.
That showed that really we are the overhand. Like symbolically, that we cut their balls, okay?
So, but remember, we never had a position to be over them, right? We were never told to conquer them.
The Maccabim, yes.
And they were in trouble for it,
yeah.
Right? The Chachamim were very angry with what the Maccabees did when they went out and attacked and conquered. And what did we get as payback? Herod.
Yeah.
Right? So, that was our punishment, if you like, for what they had done. So, but in general, no, we were not. In fact, Jewish law says that when David and Solomon, when they were at their height, nobody was allowed to convert to Judaism. There was a complete stop because the conversions might be done out of fear. and you didn't want people to be afraid of the king. You only wanted people to have awe for God. So while David and Solomon were super powerful, nobody was allowed to convert. Not because we didn't like converts, but because we couldn't tell if they were afraid of the king or if they were actually coming for Torah.
People or individuals?
Individuals.
So under no circumstance.
Like that's what the Talmud says. Because how do you know? How do you even sort it out for yourself? Right? If you see this King Solomon and you see his glory growing and all of that, you may think, wow, God has really blessed this man. I want to be part of his religion. But couldn't some part of you be saying, I want to be part of his religion, so I'll get blessed like him? Or so I'll have a piece of the pie. Yeah. Or so he won't conquer me. It's so tempting to join for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, okay, you can be part of us only if we are suffering. When we have a good time, don't be part of us.
We don't have to be suffering. We don't have to be suffering. We just can't be on top. When we're on top, then there's mixed motivation. When we're in the middle or lower, then where it's clear that you're coming not for us, but for God. And that was the main thing is, when people convert, they're not supposed to be converting to be a Jew per se. They're converting to join the covenant. And that means it can't be they're attracted to us and our giant palaces and our gefilte fish. Right? They have to be attracted to what we share, which is Torah. Yes. All right. Just a little more.
The sages say, whoever offer up bullocks today should not offer them tomorrow, but they took turns in rotation.
Right. That the best way to do all of this is not by lots, not by random, but just take turns. Just your turn, just go through the system.
So that means that was the halakha, what the sages say.
So there was always a tension between the Kohanim and the Chachamim, right? So there were definitely times when the Kohanim had to obey the Chachamim, the sages, because there was so much popular support behind the sages that they knew they needed to. Remember, we talked about the guy with the etrogs being thrown at him. But there were other times when the Kohanim had their own minhag that was for the Kohanim, not necessarily because they were Sadducees or Pharisees, but just a Kohanim had a minhag. And then that was a challenge to get them to see a better way. And that's why, the rabbis would sometimes have to say, look, guys, stop pushing, stop stabbing each other, stop fighting. That was because their minhag had been to push and to stab and to pull, and the sages gave them a better minhag. They had to change minhag hamakom. Chapter 5, Mishnah 7.
The 3 periods in the year, all the priests, watchers, shared equally in the festival sacrifices and in the vision of the showbread.
Right, so those are the 3 chagim. Exactly, the shlosh regalim they had to share equally. It wouldn't be fair for like one family to have Tuesday and the next watch to have Pesach. It's like, no, wait, that's not fair. So they would share those special events.
On Shavuot, they used to say to the priest, here is matzah for you, here is chametz for you.
Right. So they would have both types of the lechem panim that was used in the temple, and so they would divvy it up: one for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. You get the chametz, you get the matzah. You get the chametz, you get the matzah. They would divide it up equally.
The watch whose period of service was fixed for that festival week offered the tamid, all offering and freewill offering, and all the other public offerings, and it offered them all.
Right. So if you did have the luck that this week, because remember the weeks are solar, but this week it was the lunar holiday, then the regular week sacrifices, not the ones that were because of a holiday, but the ones that would be from a regular week any week, yes, that was yours to offer. So you would do the tamid offerings, but you wouldn't do the chag offering. That would be shared by everyone. Seems fair, right? Because otherwise, hey, wait, it's my week, but it's Pesach. Does that mean I'm out of luck? No. You get to do what it would be if it weren't Pesach. You get to do the regular stuff. But the bonus stuff, that's going to be shared.
I didn't see the part of the water that you said that was part of the celebration.
They don't go into more detail than what we got. That was it.
But
the lighting of the candelabras, the blowing of the shofar, the singing of the Levi'im, that was the ceremony.
So from where do you know about the water?
From the Gemara. Yeah.
Okay.
Number 4.
Yep, and we're almost there. We're hopefully going to make it in time.
A festival which fell next to Shabbat, either before or after it, all the watchers shared work equally in the distribution of the showbread.
Right, so right there on the edge, then they would share equally with that portion. And now we're on Mishnah 8, which is our final Mishnah.
If one day intervened between them, the watch whose time was fixed took 10 loaves, and the one that stayed behind took 2. But during the rest of the year, the incoming watch took 6 loaves, and the outgoing watch took 6.
Right. So as they're swapping out the lechem panim, the showbread, they have to decide how to divvy it up. And if there's a little bit of a gap between Shabbat and Yom Tov, then the outgoing gets more than the incoming. But the regular division would just be equal. Again, trying to avoid fights.
So who receive more usually? The people in the Hagim and Shabbat?
Well, I mean, all of the Kohanim who served would serve like for the week, right? So they're going to get at least one Shabbat in their cycle. So over the course of the whole year, everyone should get the same. And then when the Chagim come, it's supposed to be divided evenly, even though everybody is helping out with the Chag. So it's not supposed to be anyone ever getting more. I'm sure there were some strange calendar blips where one family might, but over the total system, the shifts would work out equally. Because if they didn't, they would have fought.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yehuda said the incoming watch took 7 and outgoing watch took 5. The incoming watch divided the bread in the north and the outgoing watch in the south. The watch of Bilgah always divided the bread in the south. Its ring was permanently affixed and its window was sealed.
Okay, so again, commentary is going to help clear this up. So Bilgah is the name of one of the shifts, one of the watches, mentioned in Chronicles 24.
Why so special? The only one in his name.
So according to other rabbinic sources, they were punished for the sins committed by Miriam, the daughter of one of the Kohanim. Miriam committed apostasy. She became married to a Greek soldier. And when the Greeks entered the temple during the time of the Maccabees, she came in with him and acted in a disrespectful manner. As collective punishment for the whole watch, they always divided in the south, as if to say that even when they were entering their service, it is as if they are on their way out. Right? So the whole family, the whole shift got punished because of what had happened during the times of the Greeks.
Each shift is the whole family?
Yes, they're like related, yeah.
I didn't know that it was by family.
Yes, clan is probably a better term. Yeah, for the Kohanim, the yichus and the pedigree of which family were you from was very, very important. I mean, the rest of us care a little bit about that, but they were very, very meticulous, which is not surprising, as you know, they have more stringent rules about who they can marry and all of those kinds of things, and that was definitely in practice.
But they marry only between the different shifts or only inside the shift? No,
they could. The daughters could marry back and forth, no problem. And most Kohanim could also marry non-Kohanic women. They could marry a woman who was just a regular Jewish woman.
So what happens if I marry someone from a different shift?
She joins your family.
They marry.
Yes, it's for lineage. It's always following the male line. All right, which brings us to the end of Sukkah, and I don't think we're going to want to start one next week.
Rosh Hashanah.
But we can start Rosh Hashanah, but we have next week, and let me check my calendar because I think we only have one more week before I'm off.
Yeah, next week is the end of the month.
Yeah, so the 30th, and then I'm gone 6, 13, 20, and 27. So if you'd like to start Rosh Hashanah, we can start that next week, or if you want to save that until we start in July, we can.
July.
It would be the first week of July, the 6th. Sorry, no, that's June. 4th. The 4th of July. So it's up to you guys. So do you want to go ahead and just get started next week?
Study.
Okay, keep going. So Rosh Hashanah next Wednesday.
Yes.
Very good.
And they are already there in the door. Okay, so before